The Halcyon Group annual gala was the kind of event Zariah Vance would normally have spent 3 weeks preparing for. Tonight, she had spent 3 weeks dreading it. She stood near the edge of the dance floor in a red dress that fit her the way she wished everything in her life did, completely, without apology. Her third glass of champagne was half empty. Her laugh was a little too loud. Her dancing was bad enough that 2 colleagues had quietly stepped away, and she had not noticed or cared. She was having a good time. The music shifted. Someone brushed past her. She spun to avoid the collision, and nearly lost her footing. And that was when she saw him. Kellen Bryce. He was standing maybe 15 feet away, wearing a suit she didn't recognize. With a woman at his side she recognized immediately from 3 weeks of accidental Instagram discoveries. Slim, polished, the kind of put-together that made Zariah suddenly aware of the champagne on her breath and the way her dress pulled at her hips. Kellen saw her at the same moment. He smiled, not warmly, not apologetically, just that slow, easy smile of someone who has already decided how the conversation will go. He walked over. The woman followed, fingers resting lightly on his arm. Zoria. His eyes moved over her once, face, dress, glass, and settled back on her face. You look confident. That was it. That was the whole sentence. You look confident. Not beautiful. Not stunning. Confident. The way someone says, bless your heart, and means the opposite. The woman beside him said nothing. She didn't have to. Her expression did the work. Something snapped inside Zariah. Not loud, not dramatic. Just a clean, quiet break. Thank you, Zariah said, voice bright. You should see who I came with. Kellen raised one eyebrow. Oh? Zariah turned. She did not think. She did not scan the room or calculate risk. She just turned, reached for the man standing directly behind her, grabbed the front of his jacket, and kissed him. Firm, deliberate, long enough to matter. The music kept playing for exactly 2 more seconds. Then the room went quiet. When she pulled back, she expected to see a stranger's shocked face. A junior manager, a colleague she would have to apologize to on Monday. Someone she could laugh this off with later over drinks. Instead, she saw Seo Jin-hyuk. She knew his face. Everyone at Halcyon Group knew his face. It was on the wall of the lobby, on the company website, in every internal newsletter that crossed her inbox. Seo Jin-hyuk, CEO of Halcyon Group, the man who had turned a mid-sized investment firm into a billion-dollar operation in under a decade. The man whose assistant's assistant had once told her never to speak to him directly unless spoken to first. He was looking at her, not with anger, not with shock, just looking. Steady, direct, completely unmoved, the way someone looks when they have already decided what to do next and are simply waiting to do it. His hand was at her waist. She had not noticed when it got there. It was light, almost careful, but it was there, and it was not moving. Someone nearby whispered his name. Zariah's stomach dropped straight through the floor. Jin-hyuk's gaze moved, briefly, deliberately, to her lips, then back up to her eyes. He leaned in, close enough that only she could hear him. You're drunk, he said quietly. A pause. But I'm not. His hand dropped from her waist. Be careful what you start. If you're watching this right now, pause and drop the time in the comments. And if you haven't liked and subscribed yet, do it now. You're going to want to see where this goes. Chapter 2. Zariah woke up at 6:43 a.m. with a headache behind her left eye and the immediate bone-deep feeling that something was wrong. She lay still for a moment, staring at the ceiling, running through possibilities. Then it came back, the champagne, the red dress, Kellen's smile. The way she had turned without thinking. She sat up so fast the room tilted. She pressed both hands over her face and held them there. She had kissed her CEO. Not a colleague, not a manager, not some mid-level executive she could avoid for a few weeks until it blew over. Seo Jin-hyuk, the man whose name was on the building. Zariah lay back down. She stayed there for 11 minutes, genuinely considering her options. She could resign, she could relocate, she could change her name and move to a city where no one had ever heard of Halcyon Group. At 7:04 a.m., she got up and started getting dressed. Here is what no one tells you about Kellen Bryce. He was not cruel in obvious ways. He never raised his voice, never said anything that could be quoted back to him in an argument. He was patient and measured, and when he hurt her, he did it so smoothly that she spent hours afterward wondering if she had imagined it. They met at a work event. He was consulting for a firm 2 floors above hers at the time. And he had been attentive in a way she wasn't used to. Calls when he said he would call. Plans he actually kept. Compliments that felt real because they were specific. It was only later that she noticed the pattern beneath them. "That dress is bold. I like that you're comfortable in your skin," said lightly twice, about 2 different outfits, until she stopped wearing both. "You're so animated when you talk, it's endearing," said with a half smile the 3rd time her voice rose at dinner with his colleagues, until she started lowering her voice in public without realizing she was doing it. He never asked her to change. He just kept observing, commenting, adjusting, until she had drifted so far from herself that she barely noticed the distance. The last night was 3 months ago. They were at a restaurant she had picked, eating food she had ordered, and Kellen set down his fork, looked at her, and said, "I've been thinking, and I don't think this is going where I need it to go. You're not the woman I see in my future." That was it. No fight, no warning. One sentence. She sat across from him for a moment, waiting for more. There was no more. 2 weeks later, a photo appeared on a mutual friend's story. Kellen at a rooftop bar. A woman beside him. Dark hair, easy smile, a frame half the size of Zariah's. Zariah had stared at the photo for a long time. Then she had closed the app and not opened it again for 2 weeks. The Halcyon Group offices were on 12 floors of a building in the center of the city. Zariah worked on the 7th. Jin-hyuk's office was on the 11th. She had never thought much about 2 floors before today. Today, they felt like a countdown. She kept her head down from the moment she walked in. Took the stairs instead of the elevator so she could avoid small talk. Replied to emails she would normally have left until afternoon. Organized a folder on her desktop she had been ignoring for 6 months. At 10:14 a.m., her phone rang. She looked at the screen. Executive office, internal line. She sat very still for 3 seconds. Then she picked up. "Ms. Vance." The voice belonged to Jin-hyuk's assistant, calm and professional. "Mr. Seo would like to see you. 11 o'clock. The call ended. Zariah set her phone down. She had 17 minutes. The 11th floor was quieter than she expected. Her footsteps sounded too loud in the corridor. The assistant outside Jin-hyuk's office glanced up when she arrived, said nothing, and gestured toward the door. Zariah knocked. "Come in." His office was large and unhelpfully calm. Clean desk, a wall of windows, city below. Jin-hyuk was standing near the window when she entered, jacket on, hands in his pockets. He turned when she came in. He did not tell her to sit. She stood near the door with her hands clasped in front of her, heart moving fast, face working very hard to look normal. "Good morning," she said. He looked at her for a moment without responding. Then, "Do you remember what you did last night?" Zariah's mouth went dry. She forced a short laugh. "I mean, it was a company event. People get a little—" "Do you remember?" he said again, quieter. "Kissing me?" The laugh died. She stood there, mouth slightly open, with nothing left to hide behind. The silence stretched between them. She could not read his face. She had worked in this building for 2 years, and had been in the same room as Seo Jin-hyuk maybe 4 times. She did not know what he looked like when he was angry. She did not know what he looked like when he was about to let someone go. She did not know which one this was. "Good," he said finally. His voice was even, unhurried. "Because I do." He held her gaze for 1 more second. Then he turned back toward the window. "You can go," he said. "For now." Zariah walked out, pulled the door shut behind her, and stood in the corridor with her back against the wall. She did not know what had just happened. She only knew that, whatever it was not over. Chapter 3. Nothing happened. That was the part that unsettled her most. No termination letter, no HR meeting, no awkward conversation where someone handed her a box and wished her well. She came in on Monday, sat at her desk, and the day moved the same way it always did. Emails, a department briefing, lunch at her desk because she forgot to plan otherwise. Except it wasn't the same. And she knew it wasn't the same. She just couldn't point to anything specific and prove it. It started small. Tuesday morning, she was in the elevator when Jin-hyuk stepped in on the 3rd floor. She had never shared an elevator with him before. In 2 years, their paths simply hadn't crossed that way. She moved to the side, kept her eyes on her phone, said nothing. He said nothing either. But when the doors opened on her floor, she stepped out and glanced back without meaning to. He was already looking at her. not in a way she could report, not in a way she could even describe accurately if she tried. He was just looking, steady and unhurried, the way someone looks when they've already made a decision and are simply waiting for you to catch up. The doors closed. Zariah stood in the hallway for a moment. Then she went to her desk and spent the next hour reading the same email 4 times. By Wednesday, she had started taking the stairs. By Thursday, she had started recalculating which conference rooms were likely to be used by the executive team and quietly avoiding them. It didn't work. There was a cross-departmental meeting Thursday afternoon. Mid-level managers, a few senior directors, standard quarterly alignment. Zariah had attended 6 of these without incident. She sat near the middle of the table, opened her notebook, and was highlighting something when the door opened and Jin-hyuk walked in. She had not known he would be there. The invitation had come from her direct manager. He sat at the head of the table, greeted the room briefly. The meeting started. For the first 20 minutes, she was fine. Then he asked a question directed at her section, something about Q3 projections and client retention data. Her manager answered. Jin-hyuk listened, then looked at Zariah directly. You handled the Marsh account last quarter, he said. What's your read on the retention gap? She answered. Clearly, she thought. Professionally, he nodded once. Follow up with me on that. That was all. But when the meeting ended and people filed out, Zariah noticed 2 of her colleagues exchange a look she wasn't meant to see. She pretended she hadn't. The follow-up meeting was Friday at 4 p.m. She prepared for it the way she would prepare for a presentation, pulled the data, organized her notes, rehearsed a few key points so she wouldn't fumble. She was 2 sentences into her summary when Jin-hyuk looked up from the report she'd handed him and said, You're nervous? Zariah stopped. I'm not, she said. You said essentially 4 times in 2 minutes. She opened her mouth, closed it. He looked back down at the report. Continue. She did, more carefully this time, listening to her own words as she said them, which made everything worse. When she finished, he asked 2 questions, both sharp, both fair, and she answered them. He made a note, said the data was useful, thanked her for her time. She was almost at the door when he spoke again. Zoria, she turned. He hadn't looked up from the page. You don't have to keep rehearsing things before you say them. It makes the pauses obvious. She stood there. I wasn't, she started. You were. He turned a page. It's not a criticism, just an observation. She left. In the elevator, she pressed the button for her floor and stood very still, replaying the last 3 minutes. He hadn't been unkind. He hadn't said anything inappropriate. He had simply paid more attention to her than she was prepared for. And somehow, that was worse than anything else he could have done. The following week, it continued. A comment in passing about a presentation she'd given. Not a compliment, just an observation. Direct, accurate. The kind of thing that meant he had actually been listening. A moment in the break room where he poured coffee, said nothing, and left, but had clearly registered that she was there. A meeting where she made a dry joke under her breath about the length of the agenda, and the colleague beside her laughed, and she looked up and found Jin-hyuk watching her from across the room. He didn't smile. He just looked at her for a moment, like he was filing something away. She stopped making jokes in meetings. Then she realized she had stopped, and that made her angry, at herself mostly, but also at him, for being so quiet about all of it, for never doing anything she could push back against directly. She was still thinking about it Friday evening when her phone buzzed. Amari, I'm outside. Open the door. I brought food and I want information. Zariah stared at the message. Then she got up and unlocked the door. Because honestly, she needed to tell someone before it ate her alive. Chapter 4. Amari Vance did not wait to be invited inside. She walked in with a plastic bag of takeout containers, dropped onto the couch like she lived there, and looked at her sister with the focused expression of someone who had already decided they were going to get answers tonight. Talk, she said, opening a container. Zariah sat down across from her. About what? Don't. Amari pointed a fork at her. You've been weird for 2 weeks. Not your regular weird. A different kind. Every time I call you, you pick up too fast, which means you're not doing anything, which means you're in your head, which means something happened. Zariah looked at the ceiling. Zariah, I kissed my boss. Amari's fork stopped moving. The room was quiet for exactly 3 seconds. Say that again, Amari said. At the gala, Kellen was there, and he had that woman with him and he said that thing. You know, the thing he always says without technically saying anything. She stopped. I wasn't thinking. I just turned and grabbed the nearest person and kissed him. Amari was sitting very straight now, and the nearest person was Seo Jin-hyuk. Amari put down her fork. Zariah Vance. I know. The man whose name is on the... I know. The man whose name is on the... I know. Amari picked her fork back up, set it down again, picked it up. Okay, she said slowly. And what did he do? Zariah looked at the wall. He didn't pull away. The silence this time was longer. I'm coming to the next company event, Amari said. Absolutely not. As your +1 for moral support. You are not. I'll be invisible. You won't even know I'm there. Zariah knew she was there. The next company event was a quarterly networking mixer, low-key held in one of the building's top-floor lounges, the kind of thing attendance was encouraged but not mandatory for. Zariah had planned to stay 40 minutes. Amari showed up in a green dress and immediately began a detailed commentary on every person in the room. That man has been holding that same glass for 20 minutes and hasn't drunk from it once, she said, standing beside Zariah near the windows. He's either nervous or sober, maybe both. Please be quiet, Zariah said. I'm just observing. Amari's eyes moved across the room. Is he here? Don't. Because there's a man near the entrance who looks like he's mentally running background checks on everyone who walks in. And I want to know if that's normal. Zariah followed her gaze. Han Seojin was standing near the entrance. Dark suit, arms relaxed at his sides, eyes moving across the room in a slow, methodical sweep. He was not holding a drink. He was not talking to anyone. He looked completely unbothered by either of those facts. That's Jin-hyuk's bodyguard, Zariah said. Amari looked at him for a moment. He's tall. Amari, I'm going to get a drink. The bar is in the other direction. I know. Zariah watched her walk toward the entrance. Amari stopped near the bar, the one on the far side of the room, which required passing directly by the entrance, and picked up a glass of sparkling water. She turned, looked out at the room, and within 30 seconds noticed the bodyguard had shifted position. He was now closer to the left side of the room. She moved left. He didn't move again, but he didn't need to. He was already within 15 feet of her. She walked straight up to him. Are you following me? She asked. He looked at her. His expression didn't change. No. You were at the entrance. Now you're here. I moved. You moved when I moved. I'm doing my job. Amari tilted her head. And your job is, what exactly? Appearing wherever I am? He looked at her for a moment. Not dismissive, not amused, just looking. Monitoring the room. She glanced around. The room that I happened to be in. No response. Do you talk to people normally? Or is this, she gestured between them, what you consider conversation? This is me doing my job, he said. You're the one talking. Because you're not. I don't need to. Amari studied him. He was hard to read. Not in a cold way, just contained, like someone who had learned to keep everything internal, and had been doing it long enough that it was second nature. She found that interesting. What's your name? She asked. A pause. Sejun. Amari. She extended her hand. He looked at it for a half second, then shook it. Brief, firm, professional. Are you always this serious? She asked. Are you always this much trouble? She blinked. Then she laughed. Not politely, but genuinely. The kind that surprised her. Sejun's expression didn't shift, but he didn't walk away either. Keeping an eye on potential problems, he said, before she could ask the question forming on her face. Amari grinned. Oh, I like you already. He said nothing, but when she turned to walk back toward her sister, she could feel that he was still watching. She didn't check. She didn't need to. What she didn't see, what she had no way of seeing, was the moment Seojun's gaze moved from her retreating figure to Jin-hyuk across the room, and the slight, almost invisible shift in Jin-hyuk's expression when he realized who Sejun had been talking to. Chapter 5. Kellen called on a Tuesday. Zariah stared at his name on her screen for 4 rings, then picked up because ignoring it felt like admitting something. Hey, he said. Casual. Warm. Like 3 months hadn't happened. Kellen. I've been thinking about you. A pause. The gala was. I didn't expect to see you there. It's my company's gala. Right. Of course. Another pause. You looked good. She waited. I saw the photos, he said, online. Of you and, is that Seo Jin-hyuk? There it was. We were at the same event, she said. Zoraya. His voice shifted, not unkind, but certain. That's not real. Whatever that looks like, it's not what you think it is. She opened her mouth, closed it, because she wanted to say, you don't know what's real. Wanted to say, you gave up the right to an opinion 3 months ago over a dinner you didn't even finish. Wanted to say a lot of things, cleanly, and without hesitation. The words didn't come. I just don't want you to get hurt, Kellen said. I have to go, she said, and hung up. She sat at her desk for a moment, phone face down, and noticed that her jaw was tight. The run-in started the following week. Monday, the coffee shop 2 blocks from her office where she'd never seen him before. He was already there when she walked in. He waved. She nodded and ordered quickly and left. Wednesday, the parking structure after work. He was parked 2 rows from her car. Said he was visiting a client in the building. Maybe he was. Friday, a restaurant where she was having dinner with a colleague. He walked in with 2 other people, saw her immediately, and came over to say hello like it was natural. Small city, he said, smiling. Sure, she said. After he left, her colleague leaned across the table. Who was that? Nobody, Zoraya said, and meant it more than she expected to. But the calls kept coming, 1 every few days, always reasonable, always measured. Just checking in, just thinking about you. Just wanted to say, the thing about Kellen was that he never pushed hard enough to be called out. He applied pressure the way water moves, slow, consistent, patient. And he knew her well enough to know exactly where she was softest. She stopped picking up. She first met Seo Min-jae at a lunch Jin-hyuk had not warned her about. It was positioned as a casual thing, a small gathering, a few of Jin-hyuk's associates at a private restaurant. She'd worn something simple. Prepared to stay an hour? She thought it was professional. It wasn't. Min-jae was already seated when they arrived. Mid-40s, sharp-featured, with the easy confidence of someone who had never once questioned whether they belonged in a room. He stood when Jin-hyuk entered, greeted him warmly, and then looked at Zoraya. Not rudely. That was the thing. His face didn't change. His voice, when he spoke to her, was perfectly pleasant. Zoraya Vance, he said, like he'd already looked her up. Jin-hyuk mentioned you. Good things, I hope, she said, because it was the natural response. Of course. Through lunch, he was attentive, engaged, and completely impossible to read. He asked about her work, listened to her answers, laughed at the right moments. She didn't trust a single second of it. The moment came near the end of the meal. Zoraya had stepped away from the table briefly, and when she returned to the hallway just outside the private dining room, she heard Min-jae's voice through the partially open door. Calm, unhurried, the way someone talks when they're not worried about being overheard. She's not the problem, he was saying. She's fine. But she's temporary, Jin-hyuk. You always outgrow your distractions. The board is watching. The family is watching. You've worked too long and too hard to let a woman you met at a party become a headline. A pause. Jin-hyuk said something she couldn't hear. I'm not telling you what to do, Min-jae continued. I'm reminding you of what matters. That's all. Zoraya stood in that hallway for a moment. Then she straightened, walked back into the dining room, and sat down. She smiled when Min-jae looked at her. He smiled back. Neither of them said anything about the conversation. But, for the rest of the lunch, Zoraya noticed things she hadn't before. The way Min-jae steered topics. The way certain comments landed near Jin-hyuk like suggestions he was meant to absorb. The way he looked at her occasionally, not with dislike but with patience. The patience of someone who had already decided how things would end, and was simply waiting for the timeline to catch up. She's temporary. You always outgrow your distractions. He hadn't said it with cruelty. That was the part that stayed with her. He'd said it like a fact, like something too obvious to require emotion. And she had heard those words before, in different mouths, different rooms, enough times to know that the people who said them were rarely wrong. She just hadn't decided yet whether she was going to prove him right. Chapter 6. The tablet was already on the desk when she walked in. Jin-hyuk didn't greet her. He just nodded toward the chair across from him. And she sat, and he turned the screen to face her. She looked down. A gossip blog. A photo from the gala, grainy, taken from across the room, but clear enough. Her hands on the front of his jacket, his hand at her waist, their faces close. The headline read, Halcyon CEO's Mystery Woman, Office Romance or PR Stunt. Below it, another tab, an internal company message thread someone had screenshotted and posted anonymously. Speculation. Questions. 2 people she recognized by username. She looked up. How bad is it? She asked. Manageable, he said. At the moment. I can put out a statement. Say it was, I don't know, a misunderstanding. Too much champagne. People will believe that. People will believe what we give them, he said. A denial makes it bigger. It tells them there's something to deny. She thought about that. So we say nothing? We control it. He leaned back. There's a difference. She waited. He looked at her directly. Date me. The words landed so flatly she almost asked him to repeat them. I'm sorry? Publicly, he said. Controlled appearances. A consistent story, long enough for the narrative to settle and the interest to move on. Zariah stared at him. You want to fake date me. I want to manage a situation before it manages us. That's... She stopped. You understand how that sounds. It's practical. It's insane. You kissed me in front of 200 people to make your ex jealous, he said, without any particular heat. I'm offering you something that works in both our interests. You wanted him to believe something? Let's make it believable. She opened her mouth, closed it. Because the infuriating part, the part she did not want to look at directly, was that it made sense. A denial would circle back to her. A rumor, left alone, would grow its own details. But a controlled, visible, entirely boring relationship that faded naturally after a few weeks? That was a story with an ending. What does this involve? She asked. 2 or 3 public appearances, places where we'd naturally be seen, nothing complicated. He paused. You'd need to be available when needed, and consistent in how you present when we're together. And when it's over, quietly, mutually. No story. She looked at him. He looked back, waiting, not impatiently, just waiting. She thought about Kellen's voice on the phone. That's not real. She thought about the photograph, and Minjae's lunch, and the 2 weeks of elevator rides and conference rooms, and a man who paid attention to her in a way she hadn't prepared for. Fine, she said. He nodded once. There's a charity event Thursday evening. I'll have my assistant send the details. She stood to leave. Zariah. She turned. Dress like you mean it, he said. People will be watching. Thursday was fine. The event was a private art fundraiser. High ceilings, low lighting, a room full of people who were very practiced at pretending not to look at each other. Jin-hyuk arrived with her, said a few words to the right people, and moved through the room the way he moved through everything. Without rushing, without performing. She'd expected it to feel like an assignment. It mostly did. Except, at one point, she stopped in front of a piece, a large canvas, deep blue and gray, abstract but not chaotic, and stood there longer than she meant to. She wasn't thinking about the arrangement, or Kellen, or Minjae. She was just looking. You actually like it, Jin Hyuk said beside her. She hadn't heard him approach. Is that surprising? Most people in this room are here to be seen near the art, he said. Not to look at it. She glanced at him. Which are you? She turned back to the canvas. That's not an answer. No, he said. It's not. They stood there for another minute, not talking. It wasn't uncomfortable. She wasn't sure when that had happened. Later, outside, waiting for the car, a photographer caught them from across the street. She saw the flash, felt Jin-hyuk register it beside her. He didn't react, didn't move away, didn't perform. Just stood there, present and unhurried. In the car, she looked at her phone. A text from Amari. I just saw a photo of you on a blog, and I need you to call me immediately. She almost smiled. Jin-hyuk, across from her in the back seat, was looking at something on his own phone. Then he looked up briefly. You did well, he said. It's not hard to stand in a room. It is for some people. Jin-hyuk, she said, without planning to. Why didn't you just let me resign? He was quiet for a moment, long enough that she thought he wasn't going to answer. Because you didn't do anything wrong, he said finally. She looked at him. His eyes were back on his phone. It was a simple sentence, completely reasonable, the kind of thing anyone might say. but Kellen had never once said anything close to it, and she didn't know what to do with that. Chapter 7. 3 weeks into the arrangement, Zariah stopped rehearsing. Not intentionally. It just happened. Somewhere between the second public appearance and the fourth time Jin-hyuk said something so dry, she laughed before she could stop herself, and the rehearsed version of her fell away, and she forgot to put it back. It happened on a Wednesday evening at a small private dinner. 6 people, a rooftop restaurant, the kind of event that required her to sit beside him for 2 hours. She had been ready. Posture correct, conversation prepared, appropriate smile loaded. Then the host made a long, self-congratulatory toast, and Jin-hyuk leaned half an inch toward her and said very quietly, "He's been talking for 4 minutes." "I know," she whispered back. "He's going to go for 6, at least. I'll give you $20 if you cough loudly enough to cut it short." She pressed her lips together hard to keep from laughing. Lost. The laugh escaped anyway. Small, contained, but real. And the woman across from her smiled warmly like it was charming. Jin-hyuk did not smile. He straightened and looked back at the host, but she noticed he looked slightly less bored than he had 5 minutes ago. The hand at her back started at the third appearance. A gallery opening. They were moving through a crowd, and he placed his hand briefly at her back to guide her around a cluster of people. Standard, practical, the kind of thing anyone would do. Except he didn't move it when the crowd cleared. It stayed. Light. Not pushy. Just present. She didn't say anything. He didn't say anything. They kept walking. Later that night, she stood in her kitchen drinking water and thought about it longer than she should have. The real question came on a night they weren't performing for anyone. She had stayed late at the office, a deadline, nothing unusual, and was in the elevator at 8 p.m. when Jin-hyuk stepped in on the 11th floor. Jacket off, sleeves pushed up, which was the most undone she had ever seen him look. They rode down in silence. Then he said, "What did you want to be before this?" She looked at him. Before what? Before Halcyon. Before whatever path brought you here. She thought about deflecting. The habit was old and automatic. Instead, she said, "I wanted to open a bookshop." He looked at her. "Don't," she said. "I didn't say anything. You were about to look practical about it." "A bookshop," he said. Neutral. Small. Specific. The kind that sells coffee and stays open late and has a cat that hates everyone. She paused. "What?" "Nothing." He was quiet for a moment. "Why didn't you?" "Because it wasn't." She stopped. It wasn't the responsible choice. The elevator opened. They walked out together into the parking structure. "Responsible for who?" he said. She didn't answer, but she thought about it the entire drive home. Kellen texted that same night. "I heard the dinner went well. People are talking about you too. Are you happy with that?" She put her phone face down. 5 minutes later, "I'm just asking because I know you, Zariah. This isn't your world." She picked up the phone and typed, "Stop texting me." Sent it. Blocked the number. It felt better than she expected. Amari was thriving. She had attended 3 events now. Invited to 2. Present at a third through what she described as circumstance, and what Zariah described as deliberate planning. Each time, she found Sejin. Or he found her. Neither of them acknowledged which it was. At the gallery opening, Zariah had watched from across the room as Amari said something to Sojun that made him go very still. Not uncomfortable, just still, like he was processing. Amari had grinned, he had looked away, but he had also angled his body toward her for the rest of the evening. "He talked to me for 7 minutes straight tonight," Amari reported afterward, voice triumphant. "About what?" "Exit routes." He was explaining the exit routes of the building. Zariah stared at her. "It was very detailed," Amari said. "He cares a lot about exits." A pause. I think he was nervous flat the whole time, but his hands moved once. Just once. When I asked if he'd ever had to actually use an exit route in an emergency, Amari looked satisfied. He has. He wouldn't say when. At the next event, Sejun positioned himself near the entrance, where Amari would pass when she arrived. Zariah noticed. Amari definitely noticed. Sejun gave no indication of noticing that either of them noticed. When Amari walked past him, she said without stopping, "Nice spot," he said without moving. "Good visibility." She smiled at the room ahead of her. He watched her walk away for exactly 2 seconds before looking elsewhere. Zariah had seen the whole thing. She said nothing. But she felt something shift in her chest, quiet, almost tender, because Amari was someone who had never once let anyone make her feel like she was too much. And Zariah had spent 3 years forgetting how that worked. She was starting to remember, which was exactly when everything fell apart. Chapter 8. The article went up on a Thursday morning. She saw it first from a colleague's forwarded message. A link, no comment, just the link. She clicked it at her desk, read the headline, and read it again. The setup. How Halcyon's mystery woman engineered her way into the CEO's orbit. It was detailed, not accurate, but detailed in the way that mattered most, the way that mixed enough real information with the wrong conclusions, so that the wrong conclusions felt earned. It had the gala, the photo, the timeline of their public appearances. It framed everything, every event, every image, every moment, as calculated, deliberate. A woman who had used one impulsive kiss to construct a relationship with a billionaire and was now leveraging it for proximity and career protection. There was a quote from an unnamed source close to her. She saw an opportunity. Zariah is smart. She doesn't do things by accident. She read that sentence 3 times. She knew the voice behind it. She didn't need a name. By noon, it had spread. Not everywhere. It wasn't mainstream news. But in the circles that mattered to Halcyon Group, it moved fast. She could feel it in the way people looked at her in the hallway. Not hostile, just careful. The way people look at someone when they're not sure yet what to believe. She kept her face even, answered her emails, went to a meeting, came back. At 2 p.m., Jin Hyuk's assistant called. She already knew what it meant. She took the stairs up to 11. The hallway was quiet. His assistant was on a call and gestured her through. She knocked, heard him say come in, and opened the door. Min-jae was there. She stopped just inside the doorway. Min-jae stood near the window, relaxed, hands in his pockets. Jin Hyuk was at his desk. Neither of them looked alarmed. It was a calm room. That made it worse. Zariah, Jin Hyuk said. Close the door. She did. You've seen the article, he said. Yes, we're handling it. There'll be a response from the communications team by end of day. You don't need to say anything publicly. Min-jae looked at her pleasantly. These things move quickly and fade quickly. Don't worry about it. She nodded. I'll give you 2 a moment, Min-jae said. He smiled at her, the same warm, unreadable smile from the lunch, and moved toward the door. Zariah stepped aside to let him pass. She was looking at Jin Hyuk when she heard it. Min-jae's voice low, just outside the door before it closed fully. Not whispering, just not projecting. Talking to someone in the hall maybe, or to no one. Maybe just saying what he needed to say and not caring particularly who heard it. End it soon, the board meeting is in 3 weeks. Clean it up before then. Silence. No response from Jin Hyuk. Nothing audible. Just quiet. The door clicked shut. Zariah stood still. She waited. She didn't know what for. For Jin Hyuk to say something. For the silence to mean something other than what it sounded like. He was looking at the desk, then he looked up at her. His face was composed, unreadable. She had learned to sit with that face over the past weeks, had learned that it didn't mean absence, that there was usually more happening beneath it than he showed. But she had also spent 3 years with a man who was very good at being calm when he had already made a decision. And she knew that silence. She had been dismissed in that silence before. Are we good? She said. Her voice came out steady. Yes. He said, communications will have a draft to you within the hour. Okay. She picked up her bag. I'll watch for it. She walked to the door. Zariah. She paused, hand on the door. He said nothing else. Or he started to say something and didn't finish. She didn't turn around to check. I'll watch for the draft, she said, and she left. She sat at her desk for 45 minutes, answered 2 emails, forwarded something to a colleague. Then she opened her laptop, went to the HR portal, and began filling out a resignation form. She didn't do it out of anger. She wasn't shaking, wasn't crying, wasn't running on anything hot or urgent. She just knew, the same way she had known at that dinner table 3 months ago, that the moment had already passed, that whatever she had been hoping for had been settled without her, in a room she wasn't meant to hear. She had walked into this arrangement with her eyes open. She had somehow managed to forget that it was an arrangement. She submitted the form at 3:47 p.m., changed her personal number that evening, texted Amari. I'll explain later. I'm fine. She wasn't fine, but she would be. She had been here before. What she didn't know, couldn't know, from where she was standing, was that at 3:49 p.m., 2 minutes after her resignation landed in the system, Jin Yuk's desk phone rang, and the expression on his face when his assistant told him the name on the form was the first thing in years that he had not been prepared for. Chapter 9. Amari showed up at her door that Friday with 2 overnight bags and no explanation. Zariah opened the door, looked at the bags, and stepped aside. They didn't talk about it that night. They ordered food, watched something neither of them paid attention to, and went to bed. Amari took the left side without asking, the same way she had since they were kids sharing a room in their mother's house. In the morning, over coffee, Amari said, "Tell me what happened." Zariah told her. All of it. The article. Min Jae's voice through the door. The silence. The resignation form. Amari listened without interrupting, which was unusual enough that Zariah noticed. When she finished, Amari wrapped both hands around her mug. "Do you know for certain he agreed with Min Jae?" He didn't disagree. That's not the same thing. Amari, I'm not defending him. I'm asking what you know versus what you assumed. Zariah looked at her. I know what that silence means. I've heard it before. Amari was quiet for a moment. Then she nodded. Not in agreement, exactly. More like acceptance. Okay. Didn't argue. Didn't tell Zariah she was wrong or overreacting or throwing something away. That, more than anything, told Zariah that Amari understood it was serious. Seo-jun called Amari on Saturday. She stepped into the hallway to take it, but Zariah heard enough. I know, Amari said. She's with me. A pause. That's between him and her. Another pause. Longer. Seo-jun. I said no. She came back in and sat down. He wanted to know where you were, she said. I told him you were safe. That's all I gave him. Zariah nodded. Thank you. What Zariah didn't hear was what happened before that call. Seo-jun had walked into Jin Yuk's office that same morning without knocking, which he never did, and closed the door behind him. Jin Yuk looked up. I know. You're not going after her. It wasn't a question. Jin Yuk didn't answer it like one. He just looked at Seo-jun and said, she made her choice. Seo-jun stood there for a moment. No, he said. You made it for her. The office was quiet. She heard Min Jae. Seo-jun continued, and she waited. She stood in this room and she waited for you to say something, and you didn't. Jin Yuk's jaw tightened. You let her walk out, Seo-jun said. That wasn't her choice. That was yours. Jin Yuk sat at his desk for a long time after that. Not working, not moving, just sitting with what Seo-jun had said and knowing, without wanting to, that he was right. The first week without her was merely different. Her name came up in a meeting, someone asking about a project she'd been involved in, and Jin Hyuk answered the question and moved on. The second week he noticed her absence in places he hadn't expected. The break room at a certain hour, the elevator, the specific quiet that followed a meeting where someone used to say something dry and make the energy in the room shift slightly. By the third week, he stopped pretending it was just a matter of routine disruption. He traced it back the way he traced everything, methodically, without sentiment, looking for the origin point. He found it at the gala. Not when she kissed him, though that was where everything started. Before that, the moment just before, when she had been standing at the edge of the dance floor, laughing too loud, in a red dress that looked like a decision she had made entirely for herself. He had noticed her before she turned, before she grabbed him, before any of it. He had noticed her and thought, that woman is not performing for anyone in this room. He had been right. And then she had kissed him, and he had let her, and he told himself it was because the situation was already public, and pulling away would have made it worse. He had told himself that for 3 weeks. It was not true. He had let her because he had wanted to. He had kept her close because he didn't want distance. He had said nothing in that office because Min Jae was standing 10 feet away and the board meeting was in 3 weeks, and he had spent 15 years making decisions based on what was measurable and controllable and safe. And Zariah was none of those things. She was loud and warm and direct, and she laughed at his dry comments before she could stop herself. And she had wanted a bookshop with a cat that hated everyone, and she had stood in his office that last day and waited for him to say something real. He had given her nothing. He had built his entire life on control, And he had just controlled himself into losing the one person in years who had made him feel like control wasn't the only option. He picked up his phone, put it down. Sejun appeared in the doorway. "There's an event next weekend," he said. "The Vance Foundation preview. Amari confirmed she'll be there." A pause. "Zariah will be with her." Jin-Yuk looked at him for a moment. "I'll need the car at 7, he said. Chapter 10. The Vance Foundation preview was held in a renovated warehouse space downtown. Exposed brick, warm lighting, local artists. The kind of event that felt genuinely good rather than performed. Zariah had agreed to come because Amari had asked 3 times, and she had run out of reasons that didn't sound like fear. She wore something simple. Dark green. Nothing that asked for attention. She still got it. Not from the room. From herself. She stood at the entrance and took a breath and walked in with her shoulders back, and something about the way she moved had changed without her consciously deciding it should. She wasn't braced, wasn't calculating exits. She was just walking into a room. That was new. Amari appeared beside her immediately, linked an arm through hers. "You look good. Don't make it a thing. It's already a thing. You look like someone who's done being afraid." Amari scanned the room. "Wine?" "Yes." They moved through the space, stopped in front of several pieces, talked to 2 people Zariah knew from a previous job. It was an easy evening, the kind she had forgotten she was capable of having. She was mid-conversation near the back of the room when she felt it, that specific shift in the air that she had somehow learned to recognize over the past weeks. A stillness that moved toward her. She turned before she thought about it. Jin-Hyuk was crossing the room. No assistant, no Min-jae. Sojun was somewhere behind him, but at a distance that made it clear this was not a work appearance. He walked directly to her. The person she'd been talking to quietly excused themselves. Zariah didn't move. He stopped about 2 feet away, close enough to talk, far enough to give her room to choose. For a moment, he just looked at her, the same way he had looked at her in every room since the beginning. Direct, unhurried. Except this time, something in it was different. The distance he usually kept behind his eyes wasn't there. "You came," she said because she needed to say something. "I needed to talk to you, Jin-Hyuk." "Let me say it," he said, quiet, steady. "Please." She closed her mouth. He took a breath. "You kissed me to make someone jealous." He said it plainly, no accusation in it. "I know that. I knew it that night." She held his gaze. "I kept you close because I told myself it was practical. The arrangement, the optics. The board." He paused. "None of that was true. I kept you because I couldn't make myself let you go, and I didn't understand that until you were already gone." The room continued around them. Music, low voices, movement. Neither of them looked away. "I heard Min-jae," she said. "I know. You didn't say anything." "I know." His voice didn't waver, but it dropped slightly. "I should have. I stood there, and I said nothing, and I let you walk out. And that was the worst decision I've made in a very long time. I'm not asking you to forget that," he said. "I'm not standing here with a promise that Min-jae will stop or that the board won't have opinions, or that this will be simple. It won't be." He paused. "But I'm also not standing here as your CEO. I'm not offering an arrangement." He took 1 step forward. "I'm asking you to stay because you want to. Not because it's convenient. Not because it helps either of us. Because you want to." Silence. Zariah stood very still. She thought about the dinner table 3 months ago where she had waited for Kellen to say more, and there was no more. She thought about 3 years of making herself smaller and not noticing until she was already half gone. She thought about standing in Jin-Yuk's office that last day, waiting, and getting nothing. And she thought about a man who had just stood in the middle of a crowded room and said the true thing without dressing it up. She stepped forward and kissed him. Not desperate, not reckless. Certain. The way you do something when you thought it through and decided it's right. Her hand on his jaw, his hand coming up to her arm, steady and warm. The room went quiet around them. Neither of them noticed. When she pulled back, he was looking at her with an expression she hadn't seen on him before. Open, unguarded, almost surprised, like he hadn't let himself believe it would happen until it did. "Okay," she said softly. "Okay," he said back. Across the room, Amari turned to Sejun. He had been standing beside her for the last 4 minutes, watching the same thing she was watching. his face giving nothing away. So, Amari said, are you going to keep pretending you don't like me? A pause. I never said that, he said. She looked up at him. You didn't have to. For the first time, just briefly, just enough, the corner of his mouth moved. Amari grinned wide. He looked away, but he stayed right where he was. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needed to hear it today. And tell me in the comments, are you Team Zariah or Team Amari? And which moment in this story hit you the hardest? I read every single one. Don't forget to like and subscribe. There are more stories coming, and you don't want to miss them.